In this particular stand, we have two projects. We brought two projects together because they represent two projects around co-design, issues around co-design, but also they have been funded from a particular scheme, which we thought it is quite important scheme from AHRC. And that was a scheme where they wanted to promote research where communities and community organizations are directly engaged in the design of the proposals. So both projects, they have a structure where they have a phase one where you work with communities and community organizations in order to define the research proposal, and then you have phase two, which after a light touch review, you deliver the research itself. So it's a very particular funding, which we are grateful that AHRC was doing this particular type of funding, which I think had a massive effect for communities and community organizations. Actually, not a thing, we have evidence about that. So I don't know if the evidence support the quality of the particular research projects or the quality of the funding scheme. So it is, maybe it's both, but it's clearly that has a huge impact down to communities and community organizations. So that's why we brought them together as two of the 9 projects that can be funded under this particular schemes as advocates of the good impact. Well, maybe this particular project we focus very much on co-design. Co-design in the sense that you bring people together, usually with conflicting interests, or with different backgrounds, and you let them develop together ideas of how they improve their environment, how you improve public health, how you improve a community that suffer from social isolation. So anything, the ideas can be about anything. And usually in these projects, the communities and the community organizations are involved in all stages of this development, from generating the ideas about how they're going to solve this problem, reflect about these ideas and refine the ideas and implement the ideas into specific actions. So that's the common thing about the two projects. That's what we mean co-design essentially. But the Unearth Hidden Assets project look more about how these projects, how co-design practices can help us unearth assets of communities, whether this is people and their skills, or whether this is spaces that the communities appreciate and they want to use them, any kind of interpretation of assets. And the Scaling Up Co-Design was a project where we're trying to see how we can cascade co-design practices within the wider society, within communities, and within civil society organizations, so increase their impact and reach. I can give you more information, but I think I'm talking too much.
No, not at all. Can you describe what you mean? I noticed you've got something here called the cascading box. Yeah. So you mentioned the word cascade. Yeah. So can you describe a little bit more about what you mean by this cascading effect?
Yeah. Well, the cascading box was essentially a manifestation of both projects, the Unearth Hidden Assets and the Scaling Up project. So that's why I brought this particular activity. It's an activity. So people are receiving this box. You can take this box actually when we finish the interview, and there is a simple instruction. You open it, explore it, and pass it on to another person. You open the box, and inside the box you can see a camera, where you can take up to 3 pictures, and you leave it back, and then there are also postcards with colors pens, and you can leave messages and about the particular issues that you want to explore, and there are some leaflets and information where you can take with you, and you take this, you take the pictures, write your notes, and then close the box. And there are also some gifts, by the way, and you pass it on to the next person, and the next person do the same, and the box going from one person to another. So what is the purpose of that? The purpose is, on the one hand, is about revealing things that you appreciate. Each individual, this picture and the notes is about identifying things that you think that are important. The pictures, the postcards are a medium in order to capture what you think is important. But it's also about transferring that through a process, a rippling effect process, where you do something and you pass it on to another person, and there is this cascading effect, as we say. So it represents, it's an abstract representation of what was happening in the project, where we're developing co-design practices. We were doing events, and these events were we pass these practices to people that are going to do other events and other.
So in a community environment, and correct me if I'm wrong here. So in a community environment, this would be used by researchers with the community that they're trying to connect with to try and extract some of those values or those ideas.
Exactly.
And if I was receiving this in a community, then the cascade effect is where I'm going to write something in here, put it back in the box, hand it to someone else, and that might stimulate an idea in the next person down the chain.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Exactly. And this box then returned back. There is an address at the end when the box finishes, returns back to us. So we take these pictures and the postcards, and some of the people can regroup. So they look at these pictures and these notes, and you try to make sense of them, organize them, cluster them together with communities and with groups in order to identify opportunities for design, opportunities for changing your environment, changing your community. But this is one example, and we choose this particular example because it was kind of between the two projects. It was about unearthing assets of communities through photography and postcards, but it's also about cascading practices through this process.
And is the analysis of how successful this tool is purely qualitative, or is there a quantitative aspect to it?
Yeah, we didn't do for the particular one, but we did, yes, there is both. Usually what we did is that we identify the people that we call them champions or ambassadors, the people that cascading the process. And then there was formal interviews, and some, in most of the cases, we participating in events that they were running or workshops that we are running, they are running, so to evaluate how this is different from the one that we are organizing. So so the analysis was very much about using interviews and participation, observation into the workshops. And also we did audits with the organizations that have been at some point
on the receiving end.
So to see what was the effect on that process on them. But as I said, that's one example. There are many different things that were happening, many different co-design practices, from theater to, so very different from theater to structured way where communities can play a game and identify gaps and opportunities for design. And we have also games. So there was a variation. And that was the purpose, to explore a big spectrum of co-design practices and to see how this co-design practices, this spectrum, has a positive effect, or what kind of effect has negative effect.
And how long have you been doing this?
The project started February, both of them, they started February 2013. So it is 1 year and a half.
Okay. And do you want to tell us a little bit about the second one, which is scaling up?
Scaling up co-design. Well, I was talking actually for both, although I had a bit of emphasis of Unearth Hidden Assets indeed. The scaling up co-design had a little bit more emphasis on civil society organizations. So the emphasis was how, when we started the project, I have to go back. When we started the project, we gathered together. There was a summit, and there was a discussion that a lot of organizations, they are under huge pressure, not only because of the financial situation that they have less support, but also because they're doing a fantastic work on the ground, but they have limitations of how much impact they can have in their communities. Whether this community is about built environment, mental mental health issues, any kind of communities. So we thought that we need to do something where we can bring these creative activities and co-design activities in and help them to increase the impact and reach that these organizations have. So the birth of the scaling up was out of this very specific need of how we support this organization to extend their reach with the limited resources that they have and have bigger impact. And essentially through the process, that didn't happen immediately, happened at the end of phase 1, we identify a specific model of how that can happen, which we call it cross-pollination. And it was a process where we create space and workshops where these community organizations are coming together and they share existing projects, not future projects that they would like to do necessarily, but mainly existing projects. And they're trying to find the relations between skills and projects that they're doing between different civil society organizations, and cross-pollination is about basically sharing these projects, skills and resources in order to do something that has an added value, something that they couldn't deliver before, but because they are coming together, they can do it. And it is quite clear that this had a huge impact on those organizations. We know that because we did audits, because interviews, and also because we had also workshops where we reflect about as a group. So there was group and individual reflections as well, where we reflect about what was the impact, what was the change on the organization in terms of the culture of working, in terms of how you approach communities, in terms of financial benefits, and you can see that it was very successful in all these factors. I have to say, if I have the time, that we identified that there was 4 models of scaling up, increasing impact and reach, and the approach that we took, it was successful in 3 of the 4, not all of them. So the one was about extending reach in terms of reaching more people and more communities. So that was one model of scaling up co-designs about reaching more people and communities. And that was clear that was happening through this model. By adding forcing and cross-pollinating, we could reach more people and more communities. And that is fact. We have data on that. And the second one was about cascading practices of co-design, like this box, to different organizations that are not necessarily connected with our project, but still they will adopt our practices and they start working with similar processes like cross-pollination and other tools that we're offering. And again, that was we can see we have maps. Which unfortunately are not you might see it in the video presentation, where sometimes they show the cascading effect of these practices. And then there was another meaning of scaling up, which was basically doing something that you couldn't do before. So solving a more complex problem that you couldn't solve as an individual organization or before. And that, again, it was a case that most of the project that we did has a complexity that it was difficult to be addressed for individuals or organizations before this project. What we didn't achieve, it was an impact scaling up as reaching the policy level impact, so having impact on policymakers, changing the perspective of how policymakers see co-design. Maybe it's too early, but I think we have events where we're invited policymakers, so maybe there is an effect that we don't know, but we don't have evidence. So I cannot claim that we have any evidence change on the policy level impact.
You give policymakers a brown box. Yeah. They're worried about what might be in it.
Oh yeah, maybe that's a good strategy. Thank you. Maybe you should join the team.
Anyway, thank you, Theo. Excellent.